8 days away from kickoff, Iowa continues to have questions and concerns at the wide receiver position. What's game week like for a player? We'll talk about that with LeShun Daniels and our picks for week 0. Nebraska, Northwestern, Illinois on the gridiron, all coming up on today's Locked On Hawkeyes podcast.
Our Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Trent Condon, LeShun Daniels back with you for another edition of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen each and every day. We're brought to you today by Bet Online. Today's episode here, Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. Well, LeShun, we're going to get into a few of our picks a little bit later. A couple of Big Ten teams already coming up in action this week with week 0. Over in Dublin, it'll be Nebraska against Northwestern, and Illinois, they get Wyoming coming in for the opener. So 3 Big Ten teams get started. For the Hawkeyes, they are 8 days away from the opener. And let's start right there, LeShun. That week, as you kind of flip into preseason mode, getting ready to the season, and now getting ready for the actual game week, what that kind of evolution is and flipping the switch, getting ready for a real game.
Yeah, for starters, and like now, I mean, really at this point, like they probably have already, like, and for sure the coaches have already started game planning, right? They've already started, because obviously first game of the year, you want to start off strong, you want to start off 1-0, right? So coaches already start doing the game plan stuff, and we start slowly working on scout teamwork, right? Where the offense goes up against scout defense and what they're expecting for the upcoming week. Same thing with the defense going against scout offense, right? Some of that starts getting mixed in a little bit of practice, but basically there's still going to be quite a bit of Iowa on Iowa stuff until we hit Monday. And then once we get to Monday, now we're in, regular routine, right? Where, first day it's going to be probably, regular down and distance stuff. So, first and 10, second and 6, etc., focusing on that part of the game plan. Then, Tuesday comes along and now we start talking, regular down and distance blitzes, right? You start mixing in the blitzes a little bit. And then Wednesday comes and now you got third downs, what to expect on third down, what to expect in the red zone, etc., etc. But all in all, this part of the season, this is when it starts getting exciting, right? Because now you're like, okay, like the season's here. Like now we're actually, instead of going from Iowa on Iowa stuff, now we're focusing on Iowa versus Scout, right? So you start getting a little bit more excited because it's like, okay, we put in all this work for the past, 9 months, and now it's time for us to actually get out there and start hitting someone else besides our own players. So it's definitely a little bit exciting, but now a lot of it is going to become a mental piece, because obviously everyone's been training hard. All the teams around the country have gone through fall camp, right? They've gone through summer strength conditioning, and now it's like it's time to play football. And everyone's going to be physically ready, but a lot of pieces now is going to be the mental side of the football game.
So you go through game week here and you're getting ready. You guys, throughout your tenure, played some pretty good FCS teams. You played UNI early one season. You took on Illinois State, who was preseason number 2. It's an FCS team, but certainly has got to get your attention, playing teams that had top 10 rankings in their own division. And Kirk, he's not a guy that's going to exactly let you guys overlook anybody early on, is he?
No. Coach Ferentz does a great job of making sure that the guys are focused, right? No matter who the opponent is, right? Whether they are an FCS opponent or, a college football blue blood team, right? It's the same focus, same preparation every single week, and that does not change, right? So I'm sure they're watching tape from the guys last year, and everyone knows that it's going to be a new team, right? It's no exact team from year to year, but obviously they're going to be watching a bunch of tape from last year and trying to hype up the guys like, hey, they've got really, really good football players because, I mean, again, they're still a Division I program and it's hard to win in college football. I mean, FBS teams lose to FCS teams all the time. I mean, heck, I was victim to one, right? So like, um, it's not going to be a game that they're going to take lightly, right? And they're going to prepare the same way I think they prepare for every single game. And it's the first game of the year, right? So it's pretty tough to sleep with preparation goes for that first game of the season.
South Dakota State, pretty talented team. They played for a championship. They were in the spring season of 2020. They were really good that year. This program is elevated, maybe not quite to the tier of North Dakota State, but just a notch behind them. This is a dangerous team that comes in. Iowa's got to be ready to go. LeShun, one of my big talking points here, going back to spring football on my radio show, has been a little bit of the concern that is happening if things get off to a slow start. What if we see a 3-and-out right away and South Dakota State responds, they march down the field, they're up 7-0, and Petras comes out and throws a pick after that? It's going to get ugly in Kinnick. And I've been there for some ugly moments. I've been when the boo birds are out to Hawkeye players. It certainly, it's not a great feeling, even for a fan base. I think in general, it might be a little lubed up and you're booing when you shouldn't be, those kind of things. But when it gets negative, you were a part of that. You mentioned that North Dakota State game. And I remember just kind of the grumbling inside of Kinnick that day and some of the frustrations that came out. I know it from a fan side. What about from a player side when you can almost feel that negativity start to seep in from the stadium?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely feel it, right? And then sometimes, like, because not only do you feel as players, the coaches feel it. Like you kind of feel like that kind of cloud just kind of goes over like that our sideline, right? And guys like start pressing. You feel like guys just start pressing and try to make plays, right? I mean, you think back to that North Dakota State game. I mean, it was honestly, I mean, like, even looking back at it today, right? It was a game that, I mean, we should have won. It shouldn't have been an issue, right? It was a game that we should have won, right? There were plays that were really there to be made, where you know where there are plays that guys we normally make that we just didn't make that day, right? And when that cloud negativity starts to you know hover over your sideline, it's definitely not a good feeling. And you're trying to do whatever you can as a player, right, to mitigate that, right? So then you start getting into the spot where, oh, now you're trying to do a little bit more than what's called of you, more than what your role is. And that's when guys start pressing, and then you're prone to making more mistakes, things like that. And that's exactly what happened during that North Dakota State game. I mean, uh, whether it was on, in the run game on offense or it was in the pass game or even us blocking, right? It was just things that we normally take care of and that we handle and that we just didn't, right? So booze and stuff that comes like that from your home fans is definitely not easy, but we get it, right? People are Iowa fans, they're passionate group of fans, and we totally understand that, right? I mean, it's part of the thing, it's one of the things that comes with playing big time college football. But it does have an effect. But I will say this, that the coaches are always trying their best to try to mitigate that as much as possible and try to get guys to focus on the most important play, which is always the next play. So
It's wild, and it's interesting. I love our conversations now, LeShun, just being able to get your perspective. I've been a Hawkeye fan for my whole life, and been going to games since the 80s, and just getting that perspective because, yeah, I'm just a guy anymore that goes and has a couple beers before the game and maybe gets a little too loud at times and has fun with my buddies, but these are still college kids. These are guys now half my age. In fact, I mean, these could be my kids if I would have started a little bit earlier with my family. So it's just wild to think about that and bring that perspective because I'll tell you, as a fan, there are times that you guys aren't young guys. You're the guys that you're rooting for. You have that perspective that they're just robots out there, but there's feelings involved too. I mean, I can't imagine that. I remember I was in college at the time, Kyle McCann in 2001, way before your time. Iowa was playing great against Michigan. It's early in the Ferentz era. It was before the breakthrough moment. They got Michigan on the ropes, and it was him or Brad Banks who should be the quarterback. And McCann comes out on the field. He hadn't done anything wrong, but the Boo Birds were there because people wanted to see Banks come back into the game. And just even at that time, even as myself, as a 20-year-old, I felt terrible for the dude. And
Mm.
sometimes we forget that part. We forget you guys are real people, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the boos at home definitely aren't the best feeling.
Oh,
But
yeah.
when you're on the road and you're making
Oh,
their
yeah.
fans boo, you're like, okay, there we go. Like you were doing
Right.
something good. Um, but yeah, the boos from the stand from the home fans is definitely tough. But I mean, these guys are tough guys. They're not gonna let a
Yeah.
few boos totally derail them, right? And they understand like, hey, when we're getting booed, they're getting booed most of the time for a reason, right? Because the play just hasn't been up to the standards. But now when it comes to quarterbacks, now that might be a little different story. But for the most part, yeah, like the guys understand it. And they don't take it too personally.
We are going to continue, and the questions continue to mount at the wide receiver position. We'll talk to LeShun about what Iowa can do, how this offense can evolve, and if these wide receiver questions remain, just how difficult it is to do everything that the Iowa offense wants in 2022. That's as we continue on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Today's episode brought to you by betonline.net. It's the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. BetOnline has you covered. Reviews and news of every league. College football, of course, starting this weekend. Golf, NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, and NHL right around the corner. They have you covered with the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts, all at Bet Online. Head to Bet Online today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. Bet Online, where the game starts. Trent Condon and LeShun Daniels back with you on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. LeShun mentioned the wide receiver position, a position that is, well, it's just baffling looking at numbers. You look at the offensive line, and there's, normally anywhere between 13 to 18 scholarship offensive linemen. Defensive line has kind of gone that same direction. Iowa's been recruiting more and more of those kind of tweener guys. Maybe they're a safety, maybe the linebacker, but they're a great athlete. There's always 3, sometimes 4 scholarship quarterbacks there. Running back, you know about that. 5, 6, 7 running backs. Wide receiver, though, where you're playing at minimum 2, sometimes 3, 4, up to 5 wide receivers. Iowa just doesn't devote the same amount of scholarships there. I guess it kind of goes hand in hand with the style of football that the Hawkeyes play.
Yeah, yeah. I know like we talked a little bit about that just before this. And like it's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating, especially me now, like being a fan, right? It's different than when I was in the building. Like when I was in the building, it was like, yeah, like whatever. We have what we have, right? And we know like those guys are gonna go out there and make plays. And although I still feel like guys are gonna go out there and make plays, right? It's always a good thing to get more talent in the building, right? Especially through scholarships, right? Sometimes obviously you do find a superstar walk on like Iowa does year in and year out. um, but in the skill positions, I feel like that is a little bit more difficult to achieve, especially at the wide receiver position, right? So the situation that I was in right now, where we got some guys that are down, and when you lose 2 really good players through the transfer portal in the offseason, it doesn't bode well, right, for that receiver group for this upcoming week of the season. So it seems like we're missing, um, like you said, kind of devotion to that wide receiver position. And I know that they're not neglecting it in recruiting, right? I'm sure that there's plenty of guys that they're offering that are really good football players that could come in and make an impact, for sure. But when you look at Iowa's offense, right, and you look at the production that you get out of the quarterback position as of late, and the really opportunities that receivers get. Like if I'm a high 3-star or 4-star recruit, and I'm looking at teams and places that I'm considering to go play college football, I was probably not one of those teams that I'm really considering, right? If I really want to go out there and uh, catch football, right? I mean, we saw even with
Yeah.
Kevin Casper's son, right? He went and he committed to Oregon, right? I mean, it's honestly it's a smart decision by him, right? Like if I'm just looking at it as a receiver, right, and I'm comparing the programs, I'm like, why go to Iowa, right? Where
Mm.
I might have an opportunity to be a really good receiver, or I could go to Oregon where I know for a fact I'm going to get several opportunities to be able to catch the football. So it's tough because of the style that Iowa's offense runs. To get some of those good guys. But obviously they're the ones that are getting paid to go out and recruit and get some of these guys in the building. So I don't know what type of strategy has to change or what they have to do to try to bring more guys in. But I feel like that has definitely been a position of need, and it's been like that for honestly quite a while.
Well, they only have one upperclassman right now that's a scholarship wide receiver, and that's Nico Reganey, who is currently injured with a foot injury. You have three sophomores, Arlen Bruce, Keegan Johnson, and Devontae Vines. Vines, of course, is dealing with the wrist injury. Looks like he's out probably about half the year. Keegan Johnson, though we saw the picture of him at practice, still reports are he's not close to 100%. Brody Breck, he's been dealing with the hamstring. And they're just talking about one true freshman in Bostic, who, I mean, the dude looks like he's 170 pounds soaking wet. He's got some size to put on here. I know they're excited about a couple of the walk-ons. You know, Alec Wick, a kid from Regina. Ed Hinkle was his coach, so maybe Eddie taught him some tricks from back in his day when he was a great receiver for the Hawkeyes. Some of those other walk-ons, I saw Jack Johnson from Valley a whole lot over here in West Des Moines. He's a really talented guy, but we're still talking about walk-ons going up there and a schedule where you got to beat Michigan and Ohio State. And you got the behemoths over here in Wisconsin and Minnesota and Nebraska in the West. It's a scary proposition here. And if Keegan Johnson is not 100%, if he's not ready to go, him, no Reganey, you're looking at going into the Iowa State game with Arlen Bruce and really a bunch of walk-ons. I mean, that's it. You're not going to be able to win that game, I don't think, 10-7, are you?
Yeah, I mean, probably not, right? Probably not, right? I mean, granted, right, Iowa State did lose some weapons on the offense, right? But they're a team that usually can put points on the scoreboard. So in general, right, 10 points usually is not going to be enough to win football games, especially not in Power 5 football games. So they're going to have to do something, right? They're going to have to obviously get these guys that are there. They're going to have to get them up to speed, right? And I see those guys are going to have to go out there. They're going to have to make plays. I mean, there's not going to really be too many excuses for it, but it also is tougher. It puts tougher position on the quarterbacks because now, like the quarterbacks, obviously, they at this point in time, like they know, like we got to step up, we got to perform, and we got to do some good things. We got to put these good things on the football field, right? If we're going to be able to get to the goal, get to where we want to get, right? Especially now as offensive coordinator and Coach Brian Ferentz, right? He's probably looking at the group like, I have to be better as an offensive coordinator. We have to put more points on the board so we can take more pressure off the defense. And now when you're missing those receivers, right, and you know that the quarterbacks have been struggling a bunch at times over the past couple of years, it's like, okay, where are we going to go to get these plays to be made come on Saturday? So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be kind of a wild ride, at least early on in the season, while we get some guys back. But yeah, we're definitely gonna have to do something on the recruiting front to try to get some more receivers in the building that can go out there and make plays. And no offense to any walk-ons, right? Because I'm sure odds are one of the walk-ons are going to end up being a really good football player. That said, right, it's always better to have more scholarship guys in the building, just because that's just going to make your football team that much better. So
good stuff, LeShun. No doubt. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. I want to tell you right now, going on, the Ultimate College Football Preview is happening. It's a 7-episode preview with college experts. I was a part of it, so I got to hop on with the guys from Wisconsin and Minnesota. Boy, it's fun throwing shade there. LeShun, I posed this question, though, to the guys as we were going through. We're doing kind of that next tier of the Big Ten after Michigan and Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, kind of the next group, and we were a part of it. But of those three quarterbacks, Spencer Petras for us and the Hawkeyes, Graham Mertz for Wisconsin, and Tanner Morgan, who has regressed so much over the last 2 years, yet a quarterback. You're just an average offensive team for this year. You're not Iowa, you're not Wisconsin, you're not Minnesota, just a average college football team. Who would you want to be your quarterback for 2022?
That's a really, really tough question. Definitely a loaded question. To be honest, see, I don't know, right? I mean, like, if I'm an average football team, right, the one thing that I want my quarterback to be able to do is really just take care of the football, right? Not turn the ball over, right, and make decent decisions with football. And I feel like for the most part, Spencer does a relatively good job of taking care of the football. And I think he does too good of a job, right? Where I feel like he's obviously playing really, really cautious, like all the time. And some of the other guys, sometimes they do kind of let it go a little bit. Um, but to be honest, I honestly have no idea who I would choose to be my quarterback. If those three were my options, I don't know. We're probably going to be doing a lot of run the football,
Yes.
a lot of play actions. Try to avoid as much drop back passes as possible. Who did your guys pick, or who did you pick? Who the other guys pick? Because
Well,
that's
no,
very, very interesting.
nobody wanted Graham Mertz. That was, I think, a consensus out of everybody. Tanner Morgan, and it was, well, he's got Sriracha back, but as an offensive coordinator, when he was so good back 3 years ago, but that
Mm,
wasn't the question, right? It was, you're just an average team. It's not reuniting with anybody. It's nothing like that.
mm,
I think ultimately Petras, because of the arm strength, maybe has the most upside if you put a
yeah.
good offensive line in front of him. I still want to see what Spencer Petras is. And
Mhm.
because of the upside, I guess I lean, but it also shows, I think everybody that has watched our podcast and listened understand I'm not a huge Spencer Petras fan, but if I'm taking him over those other two guys, imagine how bad it's got to feel for Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Yeah, those schools are in a tough position quarterback wise, right? It just feels like that way in the Big Ten West right now. It just
Yeah.
feels
Outside
like
of Aiden
outside
McConnell.
of
Yeah.
yeah, outside of Purdue, it's like where's the quarterback play coming from the Big Ten West, right? So it'll be interesting to watch. Hoping obviously for our sake that Spencer ends up being a really,
Yes.
really good quarterback this year. So
Well, you can find that conversation. It's the Ultimate College Football Preview on your Odyssey app. You can also find it on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Again, it's the Ultimate College Football Preview, and also had some fun throwing a little shade at the Minnesota guy Kane over there and talking about his love with Phil Fleck. That guy bothers me to no degree. That's one thing. Kirk and I, there might be times that I kind of disagree with some things. Certainly offensively, they've done. There's one thing that we do not disagree with. PJ Fleck, that guy's a punk.
He's
You didn't have to deal
definitely
with him though.
yeah, I never had to deal with him, but just
Yeah.
watching him from
Ugh.
afar, it's definitely an interesting character,
That's
to
not your
say the
coaching
least.
style, is it, LeShun?
No, no,
Yeah.
no, no,
There's
not
no
at
rowing the
all.
boat happening with your guys.
No, not at all.
We'll wrap things up as we continue here. We're going to talk about a couple of games happening this weekend in the Big Ten. It's the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. All right, LeShun, final thing here as we come back, and that is 2 games in the Big Ten this week. We'll keep a running tally here, and we'll use Bet Online and the betting odds here. Not just picking the games, we've got to do it against the point spread. First game coming up tomorrow, it is Nebraska against Northwestern. It'll be 11:30 a.m. kickoff Central Time for us here in the Great Midwest. 11:30 a.m. It'll be on Big Fox. The point spread currently, I'm looking at circa 11.5 is currently the number. Nebraska favored by 11.5. Who are you taking? Pats, Cats, and the points, or are you going to be laying it with the Cornhuskers?
As much it pains me to say this, I'm definitely probably going to be leaning with the Cornhuskers.
Mm.
Last year, obviously, they had a tough year, right? They've been having tough years for a while. But all that being said, right, virtually every single game they played was a one score, almost a one possession, like one play football game, right? You see, they've got to replace some guys on offense, but I know they have several guys on defense that are coming back. So I feel like they obviously have some talent there, right? They're Nebraska. They're always going to have some type of talent. That football program. And my guess is that they're going to obviously correct a bunch of those things and probably win some of those closer games that they had. And I just feel like just talent wise, when I look at roster to roster, that Nebraska just they have the upper hand on talent, where Northwestern probably has the advantage on coaching. But I don't know if that coaching advantage is going to be good enough for them to be able to overcome the amount of talent I feel like that Nebraska has over Northwestern. So that's kind of where my pick is.
I'm right there with you. I'm on Nebraska. I think Casey Thompson, the quarterback who comes in from Texas, if you saw him late in the year, he was banged up. He was a really good quarterback at the beginning of the season, really leading up and through the Oklahoma game before he got hurt in that game. I like Casey Thompson. I think he's going to cut down on the turnovers we saw from Martinez here lately. I think Nebraska at minimum is getting back to a bowl game this year. Hopefully it's just like a 6-6 type of season. They keep Scott Frost, that meathead, around for another year. But yeah, I think they get it done. Remember, they also dominated Northwestern a year ago. I just don't see Fitz making that big of an improvement here as quickly as they would need against them. I'm going Nebraska. I'm going to lay the points with you. So we're on the same side. Game 2, our second game of the week. It is Illinois. They play host to Wyoming. Wyoming lost a ton off of last season's team. This is one that, in fact, this is one of my first bets of the year when these point spreads started coming out this summer. I jumped aboard right away. I got it when Illinois was just a 10-point favorite. Now you got to lay a little bit more. Illini are up to a 13.5-point favorite, but I like Illinois. I like Bielema. I like the style of football. He knows how to win in the Big Ten West. I also think they're going to go over their win total this year. I'm going back-to-back with the favorite, something I hate to do. I normally am an underdog player, but I'm going back to the well again. I'll lay the points with the Illini. How about you, LeShun?
Yep, same thing. I'm rocking with Illinois. Right. Honestly, I feel like obviously they're going to have their brand of football, right? They're going to be doing a bunch of running the football. They'll probably pass a little bit more this year than they probably did last year. But just feel like talent-wise, again, Illinois probably going to have a lot more players that obviously going to make a bigger impact than they do over at Wyoming, right? I don't think Wyoming has a Josh Allen back there at quarterback. So feeling pretty strong about Illinois, and they'll probably win it probably handily, and I bet they will cover the spread.
So we're on the same side in both the games. Well, nobody will get a lead after week 1. We know that. Week 0, the college football slate, as LeShun and myself are both on the same side this week. Next week, it'll officially be game week. LeShun, we'll talk on Monday. We'll get ready for things. Hopefully we'll have a depth chart. I did find out earlier today, sometimes they release that depth chart the Friday before game week. Not going to be the case this year. So going to have to wait until Monday. Hopefully I have that depth chart and a lot of conversation coming up on Monday, then a Friday podcast, and it will be game day at Kinnick Stadium 8 days away. Boy, what a time of year. LeShun, hey, best of luck to you and your group out there on the gridiron coming up here today as your teams get started. Should be a lot of fun. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're pumped. We're ready to rock and roll.
We'll do it again next week. This has been the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast.